Hey guys, and welcome to a legendary showdown between two formidable adversaries. On the left-hand side, leading the forces of the Empire, we have Walt the Salt up against Torpedo Wolves and his Lizardmen hordes. We are going to be facing each other on the Tower of Hoeth, which should be a really good, fun, open map. So let's have a little look at the builds. So for the force of Walt, here's a Empire main, I believe, and it looks like a pretty rock and roll build. We do have some cheap and cheerful spearmen guarding the flanks, as well as some halberdiers as well for some additional support, but the main battle line is going to be made up of Sigma's Sons, as well as these legendary Great Swords. Great Swords are a unit which I've been a bit harsh on in the past. I think this is one of the matchups they can certainly perform rather well in. That armor piercing will really help them pull apart Saurus warriors, break through that front line of the dinos, also easily beat Skinks, and help do some okay damage to large single entity dinos. He has a nice little skirmish corps as well. It looks like 4 units of Outriders. They do good long-range armor-piercing missiles, and if you can protect them, they can do massive damage to those big, scary threats, such as Stegodons, Carnosaurs, and the like. We do have Gotrek as well down here and leading the Hero Corps. He's going to be coming in with Heroic Fortitude, as well, of course, as being unbreakable. And we have an Amber Wizard on foot. I actually really like the Amber Wizard on their mount, but in this matchup, I can certainly see the bonuses of having them on the foot. Coming in with Transformation of Kadon to do that Manticore summon, as well as Flock of Doom. Apart from that, leading the force, we do have the mighty Wulfhart, I believe, if I can find him. There he is, lurking amongst his own men here, looking for a bit of protection. Markus Wulfhart, incredibly squishy all round, but at the same time works as a fantastic skirmish lord, coming with Amber Bow, Focus Shot, as well as Hunter's Snare. Hunter's Snare in particular is going to be nice, combining with those Outriders. Now, for the forces of the Lizardmen, they have an incredibly wide formation. It is Skinks galore. Skink cohort and red-crested Skinks into the sunset, alternating as well. Glorious positioning here. We also have the regiment-renowned cohort of Sotek helping to lead the front line. It looks like we have a Skink priest of Beasts themselves. We're going to see some Manticore on Manticore action, as well as some Flock and Doom on Flock and Doom warfare. With a bucket ton of Feral Cold Ones. It looks like 3 units to be precise. And these are a unit which I don't think is particularly very good. Any unit that's pushing it into the back line to try and shut down the enemy doesn't want to rampage. And these guys, of course, do rampage, can charge into halberdiers and all that scary stuff. But apart from that, they do cause fear. Decent armor piercing stats as well. So they don't do terrible at rear charging enemy front lines, as well as those pesky night engagements. But it looks like all the money for this force has been spent in the Air Corps. We have double Ripidactyl Riders, one of which is the Colossodon Hunters, who have that awesome Toad Rage ability, as well as some Pterodon Riders, and leading the force we have a Red-Crested Skink Chief, and he looks pretty damn badass up here in the skies, coming in with Warrior's Crest and Opal Amulet. So without further ado, let's get this battle underway. Immediately, balance power is in favour of the Lizardmen, which is rather funny, just for the simple sake they are indeed Dino Boys. But it looks like Markus Wulfhart trying to correct that by launching some big shots in straight away, using one of his magic missiles to take down one of the Colossodon Hunters. Not a bad target for him at all. Colossodon Hunters are the ultimate glass hammer. They're incredibly squishy, so if you can do any damage on them early on, it will certainly help. And it looks like the Outriders are now pouring in damage onto the Colossodon Hunters, as well as that Red-Crested Skink Chief doing some massive work. And all these units have been netted. The Outriders are going to be able to unleash hell upon them. Frontline has been engaged, and the force of the Empire struggling to hold back Skinks. Good micro by the Lizardmen player. You can see they are pushing through in different gaps throughout the whole battlefield, as the Feral Cold Ones do loop up and around that flank. This simple unit of Spearmen isn't going to be enough to trap all of those units in. Up in the skies, we do have Manticore and Manticore action. Glorious stuff, as the Empire Manticore does charge headlong into the Red-Crested Skink, and Opal Amulet has been popped, and double Ripidactyl Riders will easily be able to overcome and slaughter this Manticore rather quickly. But it looks like a big Flock of Doom is going down as well, catching a ton of the Lizardmen forces, and it looks like the Feral Manticore for the Lizardmen is actually going to be diving into the back line, trying desperately to shut down the Outriders, who are currently trading rather effectively up against the Pterodons. If we have a little look over on the flank, however, Feral Cold Ones are starting to rampage downhill towards these pesky Outriders. Now, they might not have the pace to catch them, but they certainly can harass them and force them away from the main engagement, or perhaps come for some lovely little rear charging. And it looks like that's just what they're going to be doing, hunting down the Outriders and desperately trying to force their way in. But a lovely interception by Walter there and his Spearmen. All across the front line is a bit of a damp noodle contest. Great Swords should be able to clean up most of these Skinks, but apart from that, Spearmen and Halberdiers aren't going to have the greatest time up against Skinks, and vice versa. In the back lines, we can see even more Feral Cold Ones have popped out from the trees where they were lurking, so we have 5 units all round. They're really going to be buttering up these Outriders, as the Colossodon Hunters and Ripidactyls do manage to swoop down and take out quite a few, at least pin them in place for a while. But that Red-Crested Skink Chief is getting very low health-wise. He's a particularly squishy lord. Feral Cold Ones are now looping around the outside, getting some lovely rear attacks. Looks like they managed to clear up some Outriders here. They really want to be charging into the backs of these Spearmen, as well as Great Swords to try and break them up as much as possible. It looks like down here we have a one that has gone out of control. Luckily, it is rampaging on top of the Sigma Suns instead of the Spearmen. They should be able to get some okay damage there at least. Pterodon Riders kind of just vibing up in the skies. Do need to get over here and start dropping some rock drops down on these greatswords to try to whittle them down where possible. Over in the main big old clump of troops here, Spearmen forming a shield wall, desperately holding back the enemy, allowing Gotrek to really do the damage, as well as these greatswords, whilst the mighty Markus Wulfhart does shoot shots in point-blank range into some of the little skink boys. But he is now trying to focus down some more of the elite troops, aiming up, and he does clip a Colossus Hunter, and down it goes. This is really good targeting by Wulf the Salt. Wants to bring these guys down as quickly as possible. In the back lines, it looks like the Outriders have been kind of conversed into this corner slightly, desperately trying to escape the impact of the Feral Cold Ones. It looks like one unit may actually catch some of the Outriders here, who are taken off skirmish mode, and these are certainly going to be some dead Outriders. The Velociraptor is going to be feasting quite happily tonight, and they're very near the board edge, so those Outriders will certainly be forced off there. Over here we can see the Red-Crested Skink Chief as well as Ripidactyls are going to be clearing up the Outriders. Did some lovely damage to them as well. Feral Cold Ones should be able to help chew through them every time they do indeed catch some more. And the Outriders have been rather well dealt with so far by the Lizardman player, but it is allowing the Empire to actually slowly start winning the front line. We've seen a ton of Flock of Dooms come down. There is a Manticore here to help support the Lizardmen. It really needs to focus down Markus Wulfhart if possible. But with Gotrek here and Markus, these Skinks do not stand too much of a chance. And in the distance, we can once again see Colossus Hunters chasing down Outriders. Now, one problem the Outriders have, unlike their Pistolier brethren, they do not have the 360 line of shooting. So they are going to be struggling when they are getting kited. We have a nice little close-up now of Gotrek just having an absolute whale of a time, helping out his manling allies and cleaving at the Skinks asunder. Also clipping a few Empire as well to boot, but severing the Skink heads, which is what he loves doing on his Thursday evening. Flying Manticore once again hit by a Flock of Doom, as have all of these little skink units. They don't have the best leadership or health, so combined in with the great swords, they should be able to mop up the majority of this central portion of the battlefield. Looks like the Empire is faring elsewhere pretty well as well in the front line. Spearmen, Halberdiers and Sigma Suns cleaving their way through Red-Crested Skinks and Skink cohorts, butchering them into the dirt and sending them back to Lustria. But there's still a ton of area pressure coming in by the Lizardmen. We have Ripidactyl Riders, we have the Red-Crested Skink, and still some Feral Cold Ones who do need to get their little hinds moving. Also, Skink Priest needs to come over here and start dropping some Flock of Dooms of his own. Colossus Hunters still desperately trying to chase these Outriders. They've been wasting a lot of their time hunting down these units, not actually managing to catch them and do too much damage, which is pretty bad for the Lizardmen, as there's now so much infantry left for the Force of the Empire, who can come back to hold the line as firm as possible. And these consistent Flock of Dooms will start adding up. Even the cohort of Sotek are pretty much spent at this point. And it looks like the Ripidactyl Riders have been hit by net, and this is very, very bad news for them. With the mighty Gotrek nearby, he should be able to slap them up with his axe. Although he's actually struggling to get to them, some Skinks have blocked his path. Rather brave Red-Crested Skinks there, although it looks like now that the net has gone, their bravery came in the form of being forced to fight here. And it looks like Ripidactyl Riders will be done as well at this point. Cohort of Sotek, of course, will fight to the death. Only 4 models remaining, though. Great swords just absolutely decapitating the poor little Skinks. You hate to see it. And it looks like the refusal flight has been popped. So at least these last 2 Skinks will go down with a bit more of a swing. In the back lines, looks like the Outriders have managed to pressurize the Skink Priest the Beast, charge into combat with him, and the Great Swords are being forced off here by the Pterodons, which is a good micro by the Lizardman play. You want to chase off these troops, push the balance power back to as even as you can get, and that's a big problem for the Outriders. They did get a nice surround on the Skink Priest, but in come the Feral Cold Ones, and they are going to be sinking their teeth in to these unarmoured horses. They're not going to be having a fun time at all. In fact, they immediately decide to rout. So good play so far with the Feral Cold Ones. I'd like to see a little bit more rear charging with them, but apart from that, good hunting down of the enemy. And it looks like in the distance, these Outriders were finally caught here by the Colossus Hunters, who should be able to tear them into shreds. Looks like they stopped to actually try and finish off the Red-Crested Skink Chief, which isn't a bad gambit if they had managed to get a few more shots into him, and he's forced off this other unit of Outriders. So the skirmish game has finally been won by the Lizardmen, but it took them an insane amount of time, and because of that, there's a mighty block here of Empire's troops. Another Flock of Doom going down, doing some nice work, and in come the Ripidactyls as well as the Pterodon Riders, going for a bit of a Leroy Jenkins approach, just throwing everything into the wall before doing a little bit of a cycle charging. But you can see the Empire have formed a dramatic last stand. We have Spearmen and Halberdiers pointing their pikes and spears out to the enemy. Great swords as well, ready to support them, with Markus Nice and protected, plopped right in the middle alongside his Amber Wizard. This is something out of a movie right here. They've been kind of surrounded and pushed back. Markus has decent ammunition left, should be able to rain some shots in, hopefully finish off that Skink Priest or fly up into the skies up against the Ripidactyls and Red Crested Skink Chief and the like. A ton of those men forces are now running for the hills. Red Crested Skink Chief may better come over here and rescue them a little bit if possible. So the Empire troops, every time anything does land, they're absolutely destroying it. This poor little Skink Priest, as well as the Red Crested Skinks, getting forced off once more, and I don't see that, oh, they're in fact shattered, and the Skink Priest may come back. Some Flock of Dooms here would be rather lovely, and look at this just horrendous blob of state troops just standing around. Is there any rock drops left? It looks like the Terran Riders have indeed used their rock drop. Okay, imagine a rock drop right here. That would be unbelievably powerful right now, but it looks like the Lizardmen going to decide to chase off enemy routing troops where possible and rally their own, which is a really good idea. So we're going to fast forward through that, obviously. And it looks like the Empire have been hit there by a big fat Flock of Doom doing some lovely damage. However, the Skink Priest is now getting slaughtered by Markus Wulfhart, and yeah, down that little Skink Priest is going to go. Unless, is he going to be able to escape? Let's see if there is one more shot coming in the distance. Oh no, it looks like Markus did switch his target. Can we drop in a fat shot into the Red Crested Skink Chief? Opal Amulet has been popped. He's going to be diving backwards as well, and it looks like the shot indeed was cancelled by Markus. So baiting out the Opal Amulet then. I love this little formation of the Empire troops. Just, yeah, pikes and spears on the flanks, great swords and hero core in the centre. It's going to be really hard to crack this, and the more the Lizardmen dawdle about it, the more damage Markus will be able to pick up. It looks like he's just trying to rally his troops where possible and think about his plan, try to get that Skink Priest back, but it's not going to go too well, I don't think, for him. Pterodons are finally now back flying over. Looks like they're actually trying to bait out Markus's shots, which is an interesting idea, but with the Red Crested Skink now running for the hills, he simply cannot dodge, and down he goes. Some accurate shooting from Markus, and at this point, yeah, the Lizardmen army is going to break at the death of their lord. So the heroic, I don't even know what formation to call this. The heroic Diamond Empire Last Stand manages to claim victory there. Very well played to both of these players. A really interesting game with some huge stacks. A 20 stack of Lizardmen certainly is a crazy force to deal with, but no Saurus Warriors to really pull their way through the Empire state troops, relying heavily on that aerial core, perhaps anticipating a Karl France pick who's very popular in this matchup all round. But very well played to Torpedo Walls and Walt the Salt. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, feel free to give the video a big old thumbs up and subscribe for more Total War Warhammer content in the future. Apologies about the casting today, I'm a little bit ill, so if my voice sounds off or there's some really heavy breathing, that's just because I'm struggling a little bit. But anyway, well played to Torpedo Waltz. We can see the Red Crested Skink Chief. I actually don't hate him up in the skies here, especially when supported by the Colossal Hunters and Ripidactyls, but he didn't really get too many good matchups, and unfortunately for him, Markus Wulfhart was able to snipe him out relatively effectively, and the same problem with the Skink Priest. He managed to get one Flock of Doom off near the end there, but again, Markus Wulfhart fantastic at taking down squishy characters, and these guys are squishy by definition. Apart from that, Skinks and Red Crested Skinks did decent damage across the front line. Nothing too insane or crazy, but obviously, you know, they're not there for that. They're trying to allow the other elements to do the damage. And I must admit, I was very impressed by the Feral Cold One play. Although we can see a lot of them didn't actually end up paying for themselves. And this has been a problem with them in general. They got them some decent engagements, but they did spend most of the time chasing out Outriders. They're not the quickest of skirmish cavalry. They rampage. So overall, I'm not the biggest fan of them, but some good use of them here nonetheless, pushing away the Outriders, allowing the aerial core to kind of do its thing. But again, they didn't really have any good targets. It's just all infantry. So they spent the entire game chasing the only target they could really hop on and do some good damage, which is the Outriders, who themselves can skirmish for a long time. They're not too expensive, and it allows the main Empire force to win the day. And that's certainly what Walt the Salt did rather well. Outriders, of course, not going to get much value whatsoever, because they did spend the entire game running away, but that's completely fine if you're winning the main line engagement. Great Swords doing pretty decent damage across the board, but it really was the Sigma Suns, Halberdiers, and just the grind of the Spearmen that pulled their way through the Skink core. Ghostrek was incredibly healthy at the end, and he's obviously very tanky, being unbreakable, so it would have been a big problem for the Lizardmen, even if they did manage to break the majority of the Empire forces at the end there, with some Flock of Dooms, Rock Drops, and other such abilities. Good play as well by the Amber Wizard. 8,900 damage value is pretty insane, and 740 damage value in itself is pretty good as well. Good use of the Manticore summons as to kind of pressure the enemy where possible and help protect Markus Wulfhart, who himself was the MVP, of course. 9,500 damage dealt, 2,700 damage value. He's relatively cheap as well for a Lord option, and certainly paid his weight in gold here today. And he had ammunition left to boot as well. Assassinating both enemy characters is Markus Wulfhart's specialty, and Walt the Salt managed to pull it off. Hey guys, hope you enjoyed. Until next time, peace, and as always, stay awesome.